Today on the show, we have Mark Dean Veca. Born in Shreveport, Louisiana, and raised in Livermore, California, Veca received his BFA in painting from Otis Art Institute in Los Angeles. He has exhibited throughout North America, Europe, and Japan at institutes such as the Orange County Museum of Art, MoMA PS1, the Crocker Art Museum, the Drawing Center, and the Yorba Buena Center for the Arts. He's collaborated with brands like Nike, Original Fake, and The Hundreds, as well as bands such as Pearl Jam, Primus, and Ween. Veca's public artwork, The Miracle of La Brea, was commissioned by the LA Metro for a station at Wilshire and La Brea in Los Angeles and opened in 2025. Among his many honors, he was awarded the John S. Knutson Prize in 2018, the Kala Individual Artist Fellowship in 2011. He received a Pollock Krasner Foundation grant in 2006 and has thrice received the New York Foundation of the Arts Fellowship for painting. I am pleased to welcome to the show Mark Dean Veca. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Origins, a Creative Journey. Mark, thank you so much for being here with us today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
We'd love it if you could share with us your origin story. Tell us about your creative journey and how it began.
Yeah, so I'll start with the college years. Okay. So I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, a town called Livermore. Considering myself an artist my whole life, pretty much always into drawing and painting and learning to draw from comic books and I had some pretty good art classes in high school. Actually, we had a pretty decent art program. My parents were very supportive of me doing anything really that I wanted to do, but especially, if I wanted to do something creative, that was great. So I decided to go to Otis. Back then it was called Otis Art Institute of Parsons School of Design was the full name. And so they were also affiliated with Parsons in New York. And that was what really, I think, maybe the only school I really applied to. I mean, I checked out a couple of different art schools, applied to Otis, went down there, had, the whole interview and all that stuff. But I originally went there to study illustration because at that point in my life, growing up in the suburbs, having parents who weren't really into visual art so much, more into music, I didn't really know what art, what fine art was, what, the larger art world was. All I knew was, sort of comic books and illustration and certain things like that. So I just thought that I was going to go to Otis to become an illustrator, to study illustration. And I went to Otis and went through the foundation year. And then after that, you have to decide which department you're going into. And you have to fill out, put something on the line on the application or on the form for the following year registration. And I had a teacher who was actually pretty influential to me at that point. Her name was Jill Geigerich. And she sort of convinced, she was definitely a fine artist, had a nice career going at that time. And she sort of kind of nudged me, I guess, into the fine art department and said, if you study fine art, you can always do all of these other disciplines if you see fit, but kind of doesn't work as well the other way around. So I decided to go into the fine art department and to study painting. And that's what led me to working with Kent Twitchell, who you mentioned, he's still around. He's like kind of LA's premier old school kind of mural painter. He was doing like major photorealistic kind of murals, starting in the 70s in LA. And big paintings that you can still see alongside some of the freeways. Definitely going through downtown, you see the big one of all of the classical musicians. That one really big, really visible, really and still in very good condition. And so in my sophomore year at Otis, I had a drawing class with Kent Twitchell. And he asked the class, does anyone want to learn how to paint a mural? And if you do, I'll find you a wall and I'll show you, this every step of the way. And so a few of us raised our hands. Why I have no idea. I actually never even thought about that. Like, why was it that made me want to do that? That's really something I never considered. But it's something that obviously really changed my life, So it was me and three other people and three other students, and we spent the semester learning Kent Twitchell's very meticulous techniques for breaking down a photographic image and blowing it up to a large scale and kind of giving it sort of a paint by numbers treatment in a way where you break down all of the values and colors into shapes. And it's a very involved process. And, it's something that he kind of pioneered a specific technique. And he found us a wall on the Hollywood freeway under Western Avenue and from Caltrans. And we spent the semester working, on that project, probably a couple of days a week, amidst our other assignments. And it was a blast. I mean, it was really, really fun, and it was definitely learned a lot more from that than I would have from a typical drawing class, just in so many ways. And that really came in handy much later when I got an opportunity to do a project at the Drawing Center in New York, so I felt very confident that I could do something like that.
Just love that story, Mark. So, you're in school, style is so much different. So, the way this paint by number stuff, and so when you hit on it, like you went to Drawing Center, but what's the next evolution of getting to art? So now you've studied, you've got this degree in illustration, and what's the next part of the story?
So did that class with Kent, and that was great. And then, that was, like I said, sophomore year, I went on to study with a bunch of other people and had some really interesting professors at Otis and students, and, that whole experience. And, at a certain certain style of, my work has always been more about line and drawing and all of that than anything else. And so I sort of, like in my junior year, a certain sort of gestural, linear kind of figurative work kind of evolved, and I kind of ran with that the rest of art school. And when I graduated, then it was like, I didn't go to grad school. And I think back then, a lot of artists, or most of the people that I know, didn't go to grad school. I think nowadays it's kind of everybody, a lot of people do. It's become more the norm, I think, than it was then. And I had just had enough school. I was like, oh, this is enough. I don't want to write another paper about this or like explain myself to that person, or, I was over it. I didn't in the end, but I got out and just do my thing, and I had a really great studio on Washington near La Brea, a really great storefront studio, and I had a place to work, and I had some kind of job, just working in making crates, doing all that kind of stuff, and trying to figure out, like, I had no idea. I was really floundering, what do I do now? Element of that I remember is Otis, which is a perfectly fine school, and like I had my issues with it, but probably with anything. But at that particular period of time, CalArts was hot school. Like, so if you were an artist and living in LA and you didn't go to CalArts, yeah, you just didn't really,
you didn't exist.
It's kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, I've got this other guy over here that did go to CalArts. That's the way I felt, whether it was true or not. So, and it's also a matter of just, for me personally, it was making that adjustment. Okay, now you're on your own, up to you to make it all have to work. To even just forget about trying to get it shown or anything else. It was up to me to make the work, to try to make a living and trying to function in the world as an adult outside of the school setting, right? So I did flounder around there for a while, and I did make some work, and I did have, maybe I was in a show here or there, and I experimented with some other things, making furniture for a little bit. I really didn't know where I was headed with all of this, but I knew I was an artist, and I had ever had another, like, really doing anything else. And then, so now we're talking about like the late 80s, maybe towards like 1990, I was doing the furniture, and I ended up moving to New York, and there was really nothing holding me in LA. I had this opportunity to just go to New York. And I think that's when things really started to click for me. I think because I felt more inspired there, because in New York, everything is going on. I needed that kind of external push for me. Everything is going on around you all the time. There's people on the street doing stuff. There's guys pushing carts down the street and some things. And there's, people are doing stuff everywhere around you. I think in LA, I was just kind of taking a lot of naps. You'd see people out, but they're just driving around. I don't know. I needed something else. New York provided me with that. In New York, I definitely got a little bit more serious about what I was doing. And I was also sharing a studio with one of my former professors, an artist named Jim Morphesis, who I studied with at Otis, who had moved to New York. And Jim's wife at the time had kind of encouraged me to move to New York. And I didn't realize that she told everybody that they should move to New York. I thought it was just me, especially. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll move to New York. But, thankfully she did. So I had shared this studio with them and had this great spot in Tribeca and just right in the middle of it. Great.
That's such a cool story. And I love the idea of finding out later that she had told everyone to move to New York, but you took it like super seriously. But it ended up making a big difference. I'd love to hear about for you, when you say you started taking the work more seriously, could you just kind of elucidate a bit more on what that means to you?
I mean, it's a little hard to describe, but I think what I'm trying to say maybe is that I was kind of all over the map at that point. And kind of what I mentioned about, making furniture and doing the different disciplines, really sure about which direction I wanted to go in. Part of that was because I felt like I had options. I keep going and be a painter, or, maybe an illustrator, maybe I do cartoons. Maybe I could make furniture. I felt like I had a lot of options, which is nice, but maybe not nice for me. For my personality, I kind of needed to narrow it down, focus more on a couple of things than spreading myself thin between a bunch of things. And so one day I said, okay, I have to like three things and forget everything else. Because I remember now I was submitting cartoons to the New Yorker. I was making candles, which turned into a business that I supported myself with for a while. I was doing kind of the furniture, maybe, I don't know. So finally I was more serious and said, okay, I'm going to just really focus on these things. I had a little studio. I needed to kind of make a break from the work I was doing in LA. That was also kind of a tricky thing to do. You can't just decide one day, okay, I'm going to completely change what I do. You want to evolve, but it's hard. You can't obviously evolve overnight. Trying to come up with some new work. It was still my work that I felt was kind of a step for me, a step in the forward direction. That took a little time, but it's just something that evolved. I kind of just had to let it happen, kind of through a process of automatic drawing and experimentation. Finally, something kind of took hold.
Could you share, for a lot of people who might just be getting started in their creative careers, I think there's kind of this side, people just magically find their style and like it happens. How long would you say it took you graduated until you feel like you landed kind of this evolution of what you had been working on?
Well, when I was in school, I was doing this sort of gestural, sort of cartoon, autobiographical kind of figurative work. I had success with that when I was in school. I was making some sales and getting into some shows. Felt like it was well received, let's put it that way, by the professors as well. That was great. Later on, like when I moved to New York, trying to figure that stuff out, I did want to break from that. It took me, I'm not sure, like trying to think now, because I haven't really thought about this, but I remember moving into the other studio. I kind of latched on to like a certain kind of imagery that was related to Popeye. It was this kind of image through the automatic drawing. Some of the characters from Popeye sort of bubbled up. They kind of fascinated me, kind of just latched on, kind of ran with for the next, so we're talking about like 91 is when I moved to New York. Between 91 and 96, basically, I was kind of really just kind of almost 100% focused on those characters and trying to they were kind of abstracted, deconstructed cartoon characters from Popeye. But I was basically just using them in a very formal way, like trying to use these things in every way that I wanted to, just to experiment, working in a new way. Or if I had a new idea, a new way of presenting them, I would just try it and follow it through. And I ended up doing that with other cartoon imagery as well. So over that period of time, early 90s, I was doing that. Then I kind of got burned out thinking, okay, this is getting a little repetitive. I mean, that kind of culminated in the big mural that I did with the Drawing Center that I mentioned earlier. It was a big mural of using that Popeye figure repeated on the wall hundreds of times, very large scale. And that was really the culmination of all that. I felt like I needed to sort of retire this thing. I think what I'm trying to get at is kind of evolving organically and kind of slowly eventually out of that really recognizable characters into more of just like using sort of cartoon iconography and mark making for the next whatever 5 years or so. It changed again and got more refined, and it's more like what I'm doing now, I guess.
I love that finding this, and then you kind of get bored of this to do the next evolution. It even like when you start out, Mark, you were even hinting at it, like, oh, I'm doing furniture, I'm doing candle. Find yourself something, find the next thing. It's like this constant evolution, right? Every creative person they have this force that's forcing you to change, influences on you that cause this change. And the example I use, like, is in my life, it's like Gene Day. I'm obsessed with Gene Day. Now I'm obsessed with Tonino Del Colli, who is a famous cinematographer. These are influences. They might not directly change how you draw or create, but they're influences. I'm curious, as you're going through this is why I'm loving this conversation with you. What are some of these influences that are starting to seep into you or that constantly drive you and feed this creativity that keeps you evolving?
I'd say there's a lot of interesting stuff about evolving and maybe getting bored with a certain way of working or a certain, it's just like, so like I said, I ran with this sort of Popeye thing for many years. I really felt strongly about it and I did have some success with it. I felt like it was strong, but I felt like, yeah, I keep doing this stuff and I think it's really great. I'm not getting the response that I want to get. What do I have to do? Like, I think this stuff is really cool. At a certain point, it's like, okay, well, I guess I've done that enough times and I've shown it to people and it's not going where I want it to go. But sometimes looking back, the kind of ironic part of that is I look back on it and sometimes I should have just kept doing it because it was really good. It was like, I look back on a lot of that stuff and say, wow, that stuff, like maybe I just needed to keep doing it longer. And some of the people, like you see a lot of artists in art history, a lot of very big artists, famous artists, whatever, successful artists who have done like the same thing for a long time. I guess the thing is that like, that's what you want to do. There's nothing wrong with that. But I guess for me at the time, and I can't go back and have regret or any of that change anything, but I look back and think, oh, well, I should have kept doing that. I think that's happened to me more than once, when I made another change later on for the same reasons, not because it wasn't being well received. I just kind of got like played out. For me, I just feel like if I'm bored with it, everyone else, not true. I can't do this anymore. I would make, in my mind, it felt like a drastic. I don't know if it was that drastic. I think maybe I could have let it evolve a little slower. This is just all like hindsight being 2020 and Monday morning quarterback and all that with myself. Looking back, could have maybe stretched that out, let it evolve slower so that maybe the audience follow along a little bit better. At the time, you need to do what you feel is right because there's nobody can tell you what to do. No one. So that's all a big part of it.
Digging into that a little bit, would you be able to maybe describe what that feels like when you know that time to change or to give up character or something, especially maybe even if it commercially still feeling very viable, like you're getting noticed, you're selling paintings, hired for different things based off your style and this thing that seems to be working career-wise? What does that feel like? And to let it go, even though you feel like, oh, this could continue to sustain my career.
I was just thinking about how definitely the work I was doing like in the early 2000s, it was more of this based wallpaper pattern, this toile de jouy type of work with a lot of found imagery and fine line work and all of this. And it was definitely had a lot of success with that. And at a certain point, I felt like I needed change. I think also feel like I thought taking a huge risk by, like I felt confident enough that I could do that. And I think I started doing some other things and got some positive feedback on that, which gave me sort of like, oh, okay, I can still do this and not completely like sink my ship here. I can't really recall like a feeling associated with that, but it was really more about what I needed to do for myself just to like be able to keep working, keep going. I think it was only much later done it so quickly, or maybe I should have, but there were things that I didn't need to completely reject in that moment. But then again, what I realized much later as well was I can go back to anything that I want. I can go back and do any of that work now if I want to. No rule against, right? There's no law that says I can't. I circle back all the time and pull things out of the past if it's something that makes sense for me to do now.
I'm loving this conversation because these are the kind of things they don't teach you in school. When you walk out as this creative person, like friend who's a doctor is like, oh yeah, I just do ABC, where this creative thing isn't, it's going back to your candles and furniture and talking about now you're just going back to stuff. I'm interested, pulling on this, you were talking about the risk and keep going. What do you think was at the time, I'm gonna take this risk? And looking back, well, that was a smart risk. What were those in your career risks you were willing to take or tried? I mean, going to New York, one of them.
Going to New York, I felt like I didn't have anything to lose, really. I felt like there was nothing holding me in LA. I had been in New York, loved it. I'm just going to go. That's also maybe a running away from, I've always sort of been a little bit of a runner in that way, like running away from the Bay Area, go to art school in LA, and then running away from LA from whatever my issues were at the time. And I ended up running away from New York and back to LA eventually. And now I'm stuck here. I think the thing is, you really have to be taking risks all the time, right? You really have to be taking risks in everything you do. You want it interesting, something really good, value, or whatever. I mean, if you're going to do things are going to work, right? That's the worst thing you can do. So going to New York, I guess maybe I was just too dumb to know it was a big risk. Yeah, it was just like, I'm going to New York. And I had never really wanted to do that most of my life. I was always a little bit intimidated about going to New York and wondering how I would survive, just make ends meet, basically, because it sounded very scary. But it wasn't. I did have a little bit of a support system there that helped, friends, just going there, working, and then I'm starting to lose my train of thought here, thinking about those days, trying to stick to the risk idea. Every time you show it to someone, that's the other one. That's an important one, but it's, okay, I've made this thing and you have to put it out there. And I was always taught that the work isn't complete till you show it to someone, right? That's what we learned in school. But then, start bringing, back then it was your slide. You had the slides of your work. You would bring them to a gallery. They're not in it. Submit them to these different shows. But New York had actually a very good art scene, alternative spaces for young artists, white columns where you could bring your work. They would look at it and they would give shows to young artists. And there was columns, other places like that were really important. LA didn't have much of that at that time. Nowadays, I don't know, honestly, how those things stack up. That was just how you did it, meeting other artists. And I ended up getting a job at the Guggenheim Museum as a guard. And that was actually a really good way to meet other artists, because they almost exclusively hiring young artists to be guards at that time, which was kind of unheard of. If you went to the other museums in New York, you would see your sort of typical security guard. And this was just like a bunch of young artists. It was that perfect for me because I got to meet a lot of interesting artists who were in the same boat as I was. And that's also when I was doing candles, other stuff. But the candles got me out of being a guard eventually. My business kind of took off enough.
That's so cool. I love this idea of just like, how much you would kind of acknowledge the environment, whether that meeting other artists kind of in the same situation or being in school, New York. So candles eventually help you build a business that lets you leave your job. And so walk us through your career from maybe like you left the Guggenheim, you have a candle business, and how is that sort of translated into or not translated, kind of all of the illustration and fine art and all of the different things that you are doing?
Well, yeah, I'll say a couple things about that. One of them is, don't think I've ever had a full-time job in my life, ever. And that was always an important thing to me, is you have to make sure that you have time to make work. And so those are really things for me. I never wanted to have a full-time job because I knew personally that I would just get home on the weekends, whatever. I just needed to have more time. So I was able to figure out how to do that, whatever. So I had a cheap place to live. And that was the priority. Same thing when I was working at the Guggenheim. I worked 3 12-hour days. That kind of gave me enough to have benefit. And so that was kind of full-time, but it wasn't, I had 4 days off and that was great. And so that I focused on making work as well. And then when I left the Guggenheim and had the candle business, which was really a seasonal, but it was in season, it was good. It was enough to really make some money. Hired friends to help me. And the business didn't last that long, but definitely allowed me time to work. And I wasn't really selling much work at that time at all. Wasn't able to make a living from my work until I was about, I don't know, almost 40. And at that point, I was still in my 30s.
Thank you for sharing that. Because I think a lot of people underestimate how long it takes to become someone who can live full time off their artwork, whether working in a studio or illustration or fine art, however that money comes in. How would you say maybe that period of your 30s, 40s, what was that looking like in terms of you building the foundations of being able to eventually do your artwork full time?
Yeah, it's like living in New York, keep trying to make sure you keep the overhead low. That's always been a big, so you don't have time jobs and you make certain sacrifices and all that, and that's fine. I had a blast. It was great. And I had good friends around, but it was really just showing work at these alternative spaces, just trying to get into shows, maybe making a sale or two here or there. And then it wasn't until we moved to Brooklyn, I got married and started doing the work evolving again at that point. And then that's when I kind of started doing some work, got more, I think, of the attention, shows, reviews, and opportunities, sales. That's when things really took off a little bit more.
I keep beating the dead horse on this podcast that I've met so many creative people, and this is why I wanted to start this podcast higher. And I'm like, oh my God, you can draw. Why are you a program manager? Or why are you a dentist? Because it was safe. Or my parents didn't, oh, you're going to be like Van Gogh and never sell a painting in your life. So no one has this conversations with anybody.
Well, speaking speaking of that, like that conversation, I mean, so I can talk about my parents, especially my dad. So he grew up in New Orleans, 30s and 40s. You know, his dad was a musician, his uncle was a musician, his brother, they were all jazz musicians in New Orleans in the 30s, and my dad in the 40s. And my grandfather had a big band, but he also worked in a newspaper, the Times-Picayune, had like a job. This is when my dad was born during the Depression. They wanted him to do something practical. And that's the old story. And he was playing in big bands when he was 14. He was a trumpet player and he loved the trumpet. The story that he always told us was that his parents wanted him to do something practical. So he became an electrical engineer. That he always regretted it. I think that he always had those regrets, kind of what you're talking about, right? You know, and who knows? Yeah, I know he loved music. I know he loved trumpet, jazz, and he continued to play throughout his whole life. But basically what I'm getting to is that when my brother and I were growing up, he always said just to do whatever we wanted, not worry about the money. If you do what you love, be good at it, and the money will take care of itself. So I have him to thank for sure, as far as like being that supportive and never like questioning, at least to me. And maybe other people he might, I wasn't worried about Mark. But he was, you know, they were all very, very supportive, my mom and dad. And my brother became a musician, and he's still a musician. He's worked for Activision doing in the sound. He's an audio director at Activision. Been in that business many years and very good at it, award-winning audio director, etc. So that was great. I'm lucky in that I didn't have to like those kinds of battles myself and my parents about what I wanted to do. The interesting flip side of that, sometimes I wonder, wow, am I doing this just to like fulfill my dad's dream? Is that why I'm doing this, for his approval? Or, I mean, can't think of having done anything else. There's never been any other question. I've done other things to support myself, mostly art-related jobs, but, you know, and still to this day, I wonder where the next sale is coming from, how we're going to pay the mortgage. I mean, it's not dire straight. It used to be, but it's still that unknown. And I know some people, friend down the street, who always can't believe that I can live that, you know, without having a steady paycheck, without knowing for sure that you are going to get paid. And in the beginning, there was definitely a certain period of time where I thought, I'm kind of getting used to this not knowing. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Maybe I should be worried about where the next paycheck is coming from, but you really can't. So you just got to believe.
I like that a lot, Mark, and thank you for sharing, because I think what I'm also hearing, and you mentioned this a few times, is the idea of prioritization. I think for a lot of people, it's easy to get sucked into other people's expectations in terms of things like buying a house or getting a new car every couple years or having a bunch of kids, etc. But to me, I don't mean to pry too much into your private life, but I hear that you've always, part of maybe not knowing where things are coming from is like making sure that you're not in some ways over investing in other parts of your life as opposed to the art career. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, it's always, you know, that whole thing of not living beyond your means. I know I have done that as well, thanks to the credit cards and all that. But you know what, the credit cards, honestly, looking back on it, that's one of the ways that I was able to get through those rough patches, right? Like talk about the days of the candle making, that whatever, maybe certain periods you're not selling a lot, or whether it's candles or anything else. But I was definitely having to rely on credit cards, and that was going to be dicey. I guess I was disciplined enough to not ever get into like a situation that I couldn't get myself out of. There's one I thought of while you were talking just now was I remember having like sort of setting very specific goals, and the goal was never to be a rich, famous artist. It was never the goal. I never set out to do that. The goal for me was to make a living as an artist, to be a working artist, and to be able to keep doing it. That was basically my goal. And it's interesting thing about that is that, so eventually that's what I became. I reached that. And then once I reached that goal, I thought, wait a minute, maybe I didn't set my goals high enough. And that just the realization came to me a few years ago. I can't remember exactly how many, but I was like, wait a minute, oh shit, I should have set my goals higher, because here I am and I reached these goals. And now it's too late for me to like try to become one of these, to achieve more, bigger, whatever, because at this point in my life, I don't have the energy. No, it's like, I'm just, okay, I'm not out there grinding and hustling like when I was 20s or 30s or even my 40s, just turned 60. So it's like, okay. And then I realized, okay, no, it's not about I should have set the higher goals. It's like, okay, I reached these goals. So now just enjoy that. I think we live in a sort of society or world that's like, it's always has to be more. You always have to be grinding, achieving more, making kind of what you're saying about making more. But I think the other sort of mantra or whatever is when you realize you have enough, you're truly rich, right? That's the thing. So I have pretty much everything. I think I have everything I need and almost everything I want. So, which is a really great place to be. So it's just, but it's still like a constant battle that I have in my own head about what is enough. Am I enough? Am I good enough? Am I, you know, where do I stand in relationship to the rest of the world, the other artists, you know, but that's all just just my own internal kind of bullshit.
I want this conversation to go on forever. And I really love and appreciate the happiness and the words you just keep saying. And I will say, meeting you at Designer Con, super fandom. Like, you're across the way from me. And I'm like, my God, that's Mark. My dad, 85 years old, is just walking over and having conversations with you. And he's like, dude, he's the nicest guy. You know who that is, Dad? No, he's cool. Like, you are like the nicest, happiest, sweetest guy. Like, my dad still was like, that was one of my favorite parts. He literally, every time I call him on Sunday, he's getting old. He tells me the same story. I had the most fun talking to them.
Oh,
so
that's great.
I can see that how you got there. Here's the super fan part. When I was apprenticing at Marvel and learning my craft of inking, being an inker, they made me go out and study people who weren't in comic books, and your name came up. That's how yes. And it's your ability to draw a line. And this is when you're in the infancy of your career, and the man's Hector, who found you, he's no longer with us, found you and was like, this guy's line art. It's just so clean and it's so nice. And then I grow up and watch you on YouTube, and you just do it effortlessly, which drives me insane. Former Inko, you can just take a paintbrush and do that. If I don't ask this, I will kill myself. So here's the question. Your line art is so meticulous and so sweet and got energy. It's got life to it. Your lines have feeling to it. So let's go a little technical. How did you find it? Is it in like a gift? Like, I'm curious of how you came up with the line art.
Okay. That's really fascinating to hear that someone at Marvel was telling you. I mean, that's amazing and that's super cool. I'll go back to, I think I was saying, like, when I moved to Brooklyn, I was kind of still working in like a more of a gestural painterly way. And I was doing a lot of the I was doing murals, and I was doing all the mural installation stuff like that. But I'd kind of been doing that for a while, late 90s in New York, doing a lot of big murals and stuff like that. But I wanted to try to get back to doing drawings and paintings, because my son was born in 1999, and I didn't want to feel comfortable like traveling as much and being away from the family. I was doing all these big murals that were temporary and they were getting painted over, because it was a way to work. It was great, but I ended up with not much to show for it in terms of things that I could show more than once, or things that I could, hey, maybe even sell. All those factors came in, and I was visiting my mother-in-law at her house in North Carolina, my wife's mother. On her bathroom wall, there was those 18th century French wallpaper designs, which usually are mythological or pastoral scenes, very elegant, and Louis XIV. So in the bathroom, you're sitting there and you're looking at this wallpaper, and it just really fascinated. I thought it was really beautiful, and the pattern was kind of all over the place, so you couldn't really find the beginning or the end, and you would always find little details and things in there that you didn't see the time before. And it was also, I don't know, maybe a little bit kind of reminded me of like psychedelia in a way, that time period. Anyway, when I got back to Brooklyn, I had taken a photo of the wallpaper. I projected it up onto a large sheet of paper. I had no idea what I was going to do, but I just sort of blocked in the basic composition of the pattern. And then I just jumped in with a little paintbrush and some, I guess it probably India ink or black acrylic ink. And I just started in improvising stuff. And by the time I'd filled up this whole large sheet of paper with all of this different imagery, I just sort of let myself run wild. And I was putting in found imagery from my memories, from growing up in high school, and all these different characters, and doing same kind of abstraction that I was doing on my paintings as well. Anyway, I ended up with a thing that was like, kind of blew me away. It was like, I feel like I discovered a new way of working, like for me. Like it opened up a whole new world of a way to work, of a way to make a painting, of just constructing something. It was very freeing, because I didn't really have any idea of where I was going with any of my other stuff. So I just started doing those, and kind of maybe I found a different brush and this and that, but I just started making those. And just by doing them over and over again, they started becoming more and more refined in a way. And I had a show of those drawings, and someone in the guest book at the show mentioned something about Rick Griffin. Like, he thought that my drawings, he compared them to Rick Griffin. Somehow I didn't even know who Rick Griffin was at this point. I mean, being a big, Bay Area, comics guy, underground comics, I didn't know who Rick Griffin was. But at that point, Rick Griffin obviously was like the master of the psychedelic posters, and just a master draftsman, just incredible. So at that point, I remember like, okay, I'm going to kind of run with this. I'm going to lean into this, so to speak, into this whole sort of way of working. So I just started leaning into that to really focus on the line work. And I think it was really, though, more than anything, it was just doing it, and doing it and doing it more and more and more and over and over and over again. And it just evolved. The first one, if you saw the first one, it would look super clunky, which was nice too. You know, it had a kind of nice charm in that way. It sold that one to Mark Parker, CEO at Nike, who bought a bunch of similar things to that, but he was a big supporter of mine back then. Thanks to my friend Stash. Got to thank Stash, who introduced me to Mark. But the line work, it just evolved, and it's just become what I do and what I love to do. And there is just something about what I always say, it's just there's something about the magic of it, of just using line, just using these very simple tools, these brushes. They're just cheap white nylon round brushes. The brushes I've been using for over 20 years, probably 25 years, that they don't make them anymore. And I just have a stockpile of them. And I use with India ink or with acrylic. And it's just being able to make shapes, forms, depth, using simple line work. I mean, just basic cross hatching and different, whatever it is. But I always loved drawing. I mean, in art school, life drawing was my favorite thing. That's kind of the story about how that whole line work element came about. I still love to do it. I can only work vertically on the wall. Like, I don't do anything flat. I don't do anything on a table or a drafting table, either standing or sitting. It's attached to the wall, because those first drawings that I was talking about were so large, I couldn't put them down on a table. I'd have to put them on the wall. They were just too big. So I got now my hand, like the gravity of standing up and having that. I can't, if I go down the table, I don't have the same kind of resistance.
That's super fascinating, Mark. And just creatives out there, if you find a tool you love, make sure you stockpile it, because you never know when it's going to go away. I hear this
I know
all the time from inkers about specific
Yeah.
brushes or pen nibs that are, discontinued, and everyone's like, or pencils, and you're just like, stock up when you find something you love.
Yeah. I don't know what I'm going to do when I run out of these, but I guess I'll have to retrain myself with something else.
This has been awesome. I would love to know if you had one piece of advice for a up and coming creative, someone who is just trying to start their career in art and would want to do what you did in terms of be a artist who can do this full time. What kind of advice would you give them?
Well, can I read a Charles Bukowski poem?
I was hoping you were going to, because
Oh, really? Have you
again,
heard this
super
poem?
fan from you. So
From me, yeah.
please.
Okay. I've read it before in this situation before. And it's funny, I read it earlier today before I came on. I was like, holy, I hadn't read this in so long. It's like, wow. And I'll try to do it justice. But Bukowski, one of my favorites, favorite poets, favorite characters, LA guy from way back. But okay, here it is. It's called Roll the Dice. If you're going to try, go all the way. Otherwise, don't even start. If you're going to try, go all the way. This could mean losing girlfriends, wives, relatives, jobs, and maybe your mind. Go all the way. It could mean not eating for 3 or 4 days. It could mean freezing on a park bench. It could mean jail. It could mean derision, mockery, isolation. Isolation is the gift. All the others are a test of your endurance, of how much you really want to do it. And you'll do it despite rejection and the worst odds, and it will be better than anything else you can imagine. If you're going to try, go all the way. There's no other feeling like that. You will be alone with the gods, and the nights will flame with fire. Do it, do it, do it, do it. All the way, all the way. You will ride life straight to perfect laughter. It's the only good fight there is.
I love that. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no, I mean, so this is something I printed out, I just noticed I printed this out October 14th, 2008. And I think it was for this talk that I did at Otis, right? And maybe you saw, but
I saw the Otis talk. Yes, sir.
Yeah, but when I was just reading this, I get more out of it, but it's the thing about the isolation is the gift. The others are a test of your endurance, of how much you really want to do it. And that's the thing that I would, at the Otis talk I mentioned too, is like, sometimes if you don't have to do it, maybe you shouldn't do it, Anyway, that's my advice.
what I love about your poem is it speaks to when you're young. It speaks to I'm in my 50s, you're in your 60s, and it still holds true, right? That's
Yeah.
just a beautiful way to say it.
Yeah. No. So thanks to Bukowski for that.
Yes. How can we find you, Mark? How can people out there find you and stay connected to you?
So Instagram at Mark Dean Veca, and Facebook, Mark Dean Veca Studio. My website, markdeanveca.com.
You gonna have any shows this year, you think? You got something going on in Tokyo, Japan.
But I mean, the show closed. He's keeping it open by appointment for a while. So depending on when you go, it might still be open. Yeah, my show called Good Vibes at the Tokyo Diaspora Gallery. And you can go to at Tokyo Diaspora to see that as well, or just go to my Instagram. Yeah, so that was really fun. That show, that was a big push for me this last summer and fall. But yeah, that was really fun. Otherwise, yeah, I don't know. This year, I just really want to focus on work in the studio. I really just want to get back in and make paintings. I'm trying to build a new studio in the backyard. Hopefully that will happen this year as well. So maybe maybe the timing is actually really good.
What would you like our listeners to know? Open-ended question.
Right now, I've been listening to, more than anything else, I listen to Ween. I love Ween. But that's not, my all-time favorite necessarily, but right now that's what I listen to. I love a lot of stuff, but yeah, so keep it simple.
People listen to Ween. There's our final thoughts.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for joining Rick and myself on another episode of Origins, A Creative Journey, a Designer Con production. Please like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, download and listen to us every place you get your favorite podcast. Follow us on Instagram at Origins, A Creative Journey, all one word. Drop us an email for thoughts, ideas, or maybe somebody you'd like us to interview at dconpodcast@gmail.com. And make sure you join us in Las Vegas for DesignerCon, North America's premier annual design convention. All the information can be found, including tickets, at designercon.com. Till then, enjoy your own creative journey.